Good morning, everyone. I thought I'm recording a video a review of a book that I recently finished. Fascinating book by a fellow by the name of Dominic Cagesso. It's called Divine Poetry, and here's a shot of the cover. Basically, it's a book on church history, which compares the history of the Old Testament Israel to the history of the Catholic Church. Now, the thing that's fascinating about this is imagine you were walking along a beach and on an island, no one knew you, you had never been there before, and there in the sand, you see your name written. You would know that something is up. This did not happen. There's certainly no way this happened by accident, and you're obviously in a situation where you're either being observed or somebody knows you're there, but the whole atmosphere of the place changes, right? And that's exactly what happens when you read this book and you think about it. Now. So Dominic's thesis was that, and this has been backed up by years of work, that if you lay out the Old Testament history, the key points of Old Testament history, and he outlines 16 of them, and then you lay that down, and then you overlay on top of that the history of the Catholic Church, you can find a one-for-one correspondence between these key events and the chronological order in which they occur lines up just as well. And so, okay, let me just show you, give you a couple points. There are 16 points. He divides the history up into, 8 different periods. Starting from the beginning until the very end of the Maccabean uprising period. All right, and the history begins with Saint Peter and Joseph. Okay, Saint Peter, both of these gentlemen were one of 12. Right, Joseph was one of 12 sons. Peter was one of 12 apostles. Joseph went to Egypt, where he was given the signet ring by Pharaoh to rule over the whole kingdom. And Peter was given the keys from Christ to rule over the church. Interesting. And then, so this is at the very beginning. St. Peter also leads the church to Rome, where they suffer persecution. And of course, Joseph leads Jacob and his family to Egypt, where ultimately, while they initially thrive, they ultimately suffer persecution. And then the next key item is Constantine and Moses. So Constantine basically freed the church from Roman persecution. Moses freed Israel from Egyptian persecution, and they basically they gave both Israel and the church legal standing. Right. Then there's the where Saint Clotilda, the Frankish barbarians crossed the Rhine River into Europe. And Moses led the Israelites across the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Both of these events populated the area. In Europe, it was populated by people who would become staunch Catholics. Okay. And then a key conversion occurred with St. Clotilda and Clovis, where Clovis was a pagan king of the Frankish tribes who was converted to Christianity by his wife, and Ruth in the Old Testament converted Boaz. She married him, and their offspring, their grandson, I think, was David. Was King David. So there was the foundation for the Davidic kingdom. And so I don't want to go into all of these things, but here just a couple interesting ones. The Carolingian kings, the Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Emperor, parallels King David, where in other words, David established Israel firmly. They became a secular power. He managed he held the kingdom. And Charlemagne, or the Carolingian kings, did the same for Christianity in Europe. They basically Christianity became a state religion. And then right after that, there was a great schism where the Eastern and Western churches separated. And in Israel, the schism was between the northern and southern kingdoms, where the northern kingdoms went off. No, I take it back. That was in the Old Testament parallel was David and Saul, where the house of David Saul went to war against David because he was jealous of David. He wanted to maintain his own power. So there was this incredible internal struggle going on in Israel, which parallels the great schism in the church between the Eastern and Western churches. The other okay, then after that, after the Davidic kingdom, the church rose to great heights. It had a period of great flowering, right? Israel did. The Davidic kingdom was like the high point of the Hebrew kingdom, high culture, high architecture, and then it culminated in King Solomon, who built this magnificent temple in Jerusalem, and that really was probably the high point. And in Christian history, that was paralleled by the Renaissance, where the popes during the Renaissance reestablished science and brought back the classical literature, architecture, painting, and all of that. This was a flowering of great culture. And then the culmination again with the construction of St. Peter's Basilica and also the King Solomon's Temple, both of which were monumental projects which required great finances, stressed out the population. Whether it was the Pope at the time, I think it was Pope Innocent, or which, I'm not sure which Pope it was, but they had to raise money. They were selling indulgences kind of in an inappropriate manner to raise money. It was putting a tax on people. In the Old Testament, Solomon was raising money. He was taxing the people. He was taxing especially the northern 10 tribes, who didn't really feel they were getting much benefit from this. They were a long way away from Jerusalem. And this ultimately led to in Israel, it led to the revolt of the 10 northern tribes under Jeroboam. And in church history, Martin Luther revolted at this. Half of the 95 Theses, or a lot of them, were directly complaining about the monetization of the church, the sale of indulgences, and it was a direct reaction against the opulent, overly opulent lifestyle in Rome. So that was the period of the revolt, and then ultimately that period ended in the Old Testament with Nebuchadnezzar, who basically came and destroyed the Davidic kingdom. He deposed the last king of the Davidic kingdom. He took the people out of Israel and totally destroyed the Jewish temple and instituted a purely secular lifestyle. In Europe, it was Napoleon. He deposed the last of the Holy Roman emperors, and instituted the Napoleonic Law, and basically the church was no longer anything but a spiritual or religious power. Then it goes on with the church recovered some of their power during in the 1929, the Lateran Treaty. Under Mussolini, the church was given back its just the Vatican City, and they were allowed to operate as a city-state. But they had to agree not to interfere with secular authorities. And in the Old Testament, Cyrus allowed the Jews to go back to Israel, but they could only operate in Jerusalem. They could have a little city-state in Jerusalem, and they could have Jewish law, but only very localized. And they had to stay out of a political action. And the whole thing basically culminates in Vatican II. And in the Old Testament, when Alexander conquered the Persian Empire, he destroyed the Persian rule, right? And so the Jews are sitting in Israel, in Jerusalem, and suddenly it's not the Persians they're dealing with, it's the Greeks. And the Greeks invade Israel. King Antiochus, who was one of the heirs of Alexander, invades the temple. He destroys the Jewish ceremonies. He sets up a new altar in the temple. He forbids the historic Jewish ceremonies and requires a new a pagan ceremony instead. And the Maccabees revolt against this and go up into the mountains and try to do their best to maintain the proper Jewish religion. In the New Testament, the Vatican II, the popes of the Vatican II, Paul VI especially, destroyed the altars, ordered that the altars be taken out and new altars be set up opposed to the main altar. And a new rite be instituted. The historic Mass was forbidden. Basically, this led to a revolt on the part of just a very few members of the clergy. Now, Dominic talks about Archbishop Lefebvre, which is good, and that's true. But also Bishop Tuck from Vietnam was one of the key people and one of the few people who recognized that the Vatican II church was not a valid church, and that and he then consecrated bishops under the old rite in order to maintain the integrity of the church. So that's it in a nutshell. And when you think about it, these things line up so beautifully. It's not to me. It's not an accident. And it makes you wonder what's next. In the Old Testament, at the end of the Maccabean period, we had the Anointed One. Christ was born in Israel and preached the gospel and established the church. Now, in the New Testament, what's the parallel of that going to be? Will there be a supernatural intervention of some sort to restore traditional Catholicism, or what? Who knows? But it certainly gives you pause and makes you a watchful person. So therefore, I strongly recommend this book, and I hope you order it and enjoy it. It's fascinating. So thanks a lot.